Welcome back. This is the fourth of the series of linked podcasts. Don't worry if it says 3 at the top. Remember, the first one was an introduction, and we're now working our way through a series of 5 different themes. The first was imperialism, the second was Bismarck's legacy, and this next theme, the new course and Weltpolitik, is one which you'll be very familiar with. So we can move through this one, I hope, fairly quickly. You all already know quite a lot of the context here. So as you know, Bismarck was resigned in 1890 when Kaiser Wilhelm II came into conflict with him. Remember, Kaiser Wilhelm II, 29 years old, impulsive, wanted a completely new approach to both domestic and foreign policy. And so, again, with hindsight, it wasn't so immediate at the time, but with hindsight, as historians, we can see that Bismarck's strategy of isolating France began to fall apart after Kaiser Wilhelm II took the throne in 1890. Remember in the first Chancellor Caprivi, 1890 to 94, the new course, well, of course, he was sacked in 1894. At approximately the same time, that's where we see the first big change in foreign policy. Now, I won't go into the details for it, but basically something that Bismarck had worked hook, line and sinker to prevent happened. And you know, Bismarck, if he'd been around, would have been absolutely devastated at what happened in 1894. France and Russia formed a military alliance. Now, that alliance was directed mainly against Britain, not against Germany. That's important to understand, but nevertheless, if Bismarck had been around, that would have been his worst nightmare. Why? Think about the map of Europe. You've got France in the west, Russia in the east. If they have formed a military alliance, and if Germany were to end up at war with France, which is what Bismarck had, his whole policy had been designed to prevent a situation where France would go to war with Germany. But if that were to happen, then effectively Russia would be on the French side, which would mean Germany would have to fight a war on 2 fronts, fighting against France in the west and Russia in the east. So that really was Bismarck's worst nightmare, and it happened in 1894. So a big setback from the perspective of what Bismarck had tried to achieve, although at the time, remember, it was an alliance that was directed mainly against Britain, not Germany. Then, of course, in 1897, the Kaiser introduced Weltpolitik, which we know about, which entailed a much more aggressive German foreign policy, motivated by a race for colonies. To get colonies, in particular in Africa, Germany needed to build a navy. Now, the Kaiser, you know, as we have already discussed, was very much impassioned by boat building and by the idea of building a navy. He knew fully well that would antagonise Britain, because Britain, quote, ruled the waves. Britain saw herself as having the right to, in terms of world power, to have the biggest navy in the world, because she was an island. So the Kaiser needed a policy to resolve that. Now, the Kaiser, perhaps his arrogance here, his traditional thinking was that because the traditional enemy of Britain abroad was France, and also remember because of the historic, the family ties between Germany and Britain, he believed that Weltpolitik would actually not turn Britain into an enemy, but it would force Britain out of isolation and make Britain realise that she needed to work more closely with Germany. Historically, they were close countries. They shared links through their royal families, and Britain traditionally was an enemy of France. So he actually believed that Weltpolitik would open the way for Britain and Germany to work more closely together in foreign policy. how wrong he was. Again, we can say that as historians with hindsight, but it certainly was not the way the Kaiser saw it at the time. So, in fact, Weltpolitik backfired. What it did is it challenged Britain's world supremacy to such an extent that it forced Britain to settle her differences with France. And what we can now see as historians, that it did completely the opposite of what the Kaiser intended. It generated such strong popular resentment of the German and British people towards each other. And again, we've done all of that. We've done about the pressure groups, about the propaganda, in particular the Daily Telegraph affair, which really inflated popular hostility between the two countries. That rather than bring Britain and Germany together into a common front, working together as friends, it actually drove a wedge between Germany and Britain. And the outcome was that Britain gradually, bit by bit, began to resolve her traditional problems with her traditional enemy, which was France. Now, how this actually happened, we won't go into the details, but as I said in the earlier podcast, there were two hotspot crises, both over the country of Morocco in northwest Africa. The first in 1905-6 and the second in 1911, which caused that to happen. And we can now, as historians, see that those two crises brought Britain and France together. Okay, so how did that happen? Well, in 1904, Britain and France formed a friendly agreement. It was not a military alliance, but it was a friendly agreement to work with each other to resolve their differences abroad. There's to the right there, there's a picture postcard that shows Britain and France, breaking down their traditional problems being broken down, coming together as friends. Now, of course, France and Russia had formed an alliance in 1894, and what then happened in 1907, Russia joined the Entente Cordiale. So the Entente Cordiale, the friendly agreement, became the Triple Entente. Not a military alliance, but again, it was between those three countries, Britain, France and Russia, to work together to resolve their differences. So effectively, where are we now? The outline of what would be the two sides when war broke out in 1914 has come together. You have got the Triple Alliance in the middle, Germany, Austria and Italy, that was formed by Bismarck in 1882, and now you've got Britain and France coming together with the Entente Cordiale in 1904, joined by Russia in 1907 to form the Triple Entente. The two sides have come together. That's the end of this podcast. Close this one down and go straight on to the next one. Thank you.